Hey guys, first video for me, and I'm going to start with a question. And the question is, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? And the statement is, do not lean upon your own understanding. I'll give you a second to think of your answer. Do not lean upon your own understanding. Once you have come to a conclusion about that question, take a minute to consider how you reached that conclusion. Because the fact is, you could not have done so without using your own understanding. Now you may be thinking to yourself, that can't be right, because the reason I agree with that statement is that I happen to know that it is a sentence taken out of Proverbs, and Proverbs is taken out of the Bible, and the Bible is taken out of the inerrant message of the Creator of the universe. Well, then you need only ask yourself how you came to agree with all of those propositions. And the fact is, you did so using your own understanding. The truth is, there's no way to avoid coming to conclusions by way of using your own understanding. And recognizing that goes a long way in alleviating the guilt that many people might be feeling coming across the video like this. I know at a certain point in my life, I had a lot of internal dialogue and conflict and cognitive dissonance, including that sentence itself, for daring to attempt to use my own reasoning faculty. But when you really think about it, there is no other faculty you can use when drawing conclusions about how the universe is constructed. There is no other vantage point from which you can view the outside world other than your own. It's true that you can defer responsibility for the conclusions you come to by assigning your thinking to some other person, organization, or entity. But that deference in and of itself is something you have decided to place on someone else other than yourself, using your own understanding. In philosophy, there is an idea called solipsism. Solipsism is the belief that the entire universe and everything in it, every other human being, every other physical object or animal, is all just a construct of your consciousness, and that there are no other conscious entities in the universe. I don't know that anybody actually accepts solipsism as a viable candidate for how things work, but the fact that you cannot disprove it ought to suggest to you that the only thing you can be absolutely certain of is your own conscious existence, and everything else is secondary or tertiary to that. Recognizing that fact not only alleviates guilt for daring to use your own mind, but should elicit guilt in reference to whether or not you are making the best of the mind that you have. Are you starving it of access to information, or what other available tools there are for it to truly flourish? Are you limiting its access to the rest of all of human knowledge, or are you making the best of the one mind that you have? When I was grappling with these issues, and this is quite a while back, but I came to a simple test by which you can make sure that what you are doing with your mind is the best use of it, that you are not misleading yourself, that a train of thought might not misdirect you, but lead you further towards accurate knowledge and information and truth. And that test is something I call the Adam test. The Adam test is pretty straightforward. You simply ask yourself, if Adam, of Adam and Eve, thought this way in the garden, would he have reached the right conclusion? Now this sets the bar kind of high, since according to the biblical narrative, this is the first moral dilemma ever presented to humankind. And the challenge was, how would Adam get the correct answer? And the challenge he was faced with is two competing voices. One saying, I created you, I gave you a perfect mind, a perfect body, a perfect place to live, and a perfect future. And all you have to do to maintain this status quo of perfection is avoid this tree that I have rather inconveniently placed in the center of your garden home. However, there was a competing voice originating from a serpent who said, is it really so that that other voice told you you should avoid that tree? That other voice is withholding something from you. It's trying to keep you from something better. And there is actually more hope for you, because if you consume that fruit, you will become godlike. You will dictate for yourself and not have to live in subjugation. You will be a deity in your own right. So obviously one of these voices was lying. And this original classic moral dilemma had to be resolved in the mind of Adam. So how could he go about doing that? And if he thought the way you think today, would he have gotten the right answer? I'll give you an example of the Adam test. Suppose someone says to you, the best way to find the truth is to stick to the narrative you currently have and speak only to a single source of information. Because if you really want to get to know someone well, you go only to the source. You talk to them directly, and you tune out every other third-party source of information about that person. Otherwise, you may be deceived, tricked. You may follow somebody who's slandering the original voice. Well, how would that have worked out for Adam? Suppose the serpent had said that to Adam. Not only is the original voice lying, but you shouldn't even entertain the ideas that it put forth, because it is slandering me. And if you want to see how good I am, just try the fruit. Only get your information directly from me, the serpent. Obviously, that wouldn't have worked out very well for Adam. And in practice, it doesn't work out very well in the real world, in the modern world. There are people following this line of reasoning right now who are an embarrassment to America. There are people who choose to follow a single source of information and consider everything else fake news, and they get all of their fair and balanced news directly from Fox, the only source they truly trust. They go straight to the source, maybe Trump's Twitter feed, or Sarah Huckabee Sanders, or Kellyanne Conway. And everything that disagrees with those few voices is fake news and slander, and just designed to deceive and manipulate. And the results speak for themselves. How about in your personal life? What if you tried to use this line of thinking in your personal life, and your daughter approaches you and says, hey, I met this amazing guy. I love him, and in person everything is great. The only problem is when I go online and find other sources of information, there's actually videos of him doing abhorrent and immoral things, and there's even immoral things that he's written. Is there any chance you would give your daughter the remarkably stupid advice to continue dating him and speaking only to him directly and getting all your information about him directly from him, and disregard all these other third-party sources? What if those third-party sources included things like videos of him saying, "Sell all your belongings and give them to me because the world is going to end in 1975. Give the proceeds to me." Or, "This generation will by no means pass away, the generation of 1914. So you ought to not waste any time going to school or bettering yourself because the time is so short." Or if he just said, in general, "I am the sole interpreter of Scripture, and there's no way you'll ever really understand anything as far as the Bible goes without getting it through me." It's kind of an arrogant position. Would you advise your daughter to continue only listening directly to that person? He's probably a little too old for your daughter if he's making 1975 or 1925 prophecies, but you get the idea. You would never do that in your personal life, and even in trivial matters, you would never purchase something online only getting information about it from the manufacturer's website, even though all the other reviews from people who've used it are terrible. Of course, if you want to dial in on accurate information, you should include numerous sources and be skeptical of all of them. Some sources are better than others. The point is, that line of thinking would have led Adam astray, and it doesn't work in the practical world. Let's try another Adam test. How about faith itself? The assured expectation of things hoped for, the evident demonstration of reality, though not beheld. So, the assured expectation of things hoped for, in other words, being certain of something you hope is true, though not beheld, so without evidence. Being certain of something you hope is true without evidence. How would that have played out for Adam? Well, which thing is he most likely to have hoped is true? That he could become godlike, or that he could continue in the current status quo? The fact is, if he had misapplied faith in that scenario, he would have, the biblical definition of faith includes the phrase hoped for. So, assuming he hoped to become godlike, he would not have only made the wrong decision, he would have done so with a great deal of certainty. How about the real world? How does being certain of things you hope for without any evidence map onto society today? Well, faith has obviously yielded very inconsistent results throughout all of human history. Inconsistent results, wildly varying in their outcome. So, a very faithful Jain practicing Jainism might go through great lengths to avoid killing so much as a single insect. They're careful where they step, how they shovel, how they eat. And they use the method of faith to come to their conclusion. Meanwhile, there are 19 extremely faithful men who on 9/11 use their faith to motivate them to kill thousands of innocent people, because in the marrow of their bones, they knew paradise was more real than this temporary illusion of a world that they lived in. And they were going to be part of this grand cosmic scheme that would initiate the war between Allah and the West. And by martyring themselves and taking out all those infidels, they secured their place in the coming kingdom of Islam. How could a good method for finding truth vary so wildly in its results? Imagine a math teacher one day telling her students, all 20 of her students, that she's going to, just for the day, use a new method called Shmaith. So rather than using math to add 2 plus 2, everybody uses this new method called Shmaith. And everybody turns in completely different results. Some people say 5,000, some people say 0. They're just very radically. it should be very obvious that Schmate is a bad mechanism for zooming in on the truth, because the truth should be consistent. You should get the same answer from all the students, the same way you do with math. So, faith is not a great way of figuring out what is real and what isn't. It can't be. There wouldn't be such inconsistent results around the world using that method. It doesn't pass the Adam test, and it doesn't work in the practical world. How about the logic that, where else am I to go? You have sayings of everlasting life. How would that have worked out for Adam? What if Adam told the original voice who told him not to eat of the fruit that he prefers the other alternative? That the serpent is actually giving him some hope, something better to look forward to than the life he is currently living. And he simply said the alternative is not as appealing. Continuing life here sounds great, but it could be even better if I become godlike. So why would I go anywhere but to the serpent? Because the serpent is telling me the best story. Wouldn't have worked out for Adam, and certainly doesn't work out very well in the real world. Imagine using this line of thinking if there was some 20-year-old kid who still believes in Santa Claus. And you are fed up that he's so old and he still believes in Santa Claus. So you take photos and of his parents wrapping the presents, and you go to Radio Shack and you get the receipts from his dad who bought all of these presents at Radio Shack for some reason. And when you go to confront him with all this physical evidence, this 20-year-old tells you, I'm not even going to open my eyes and look at this, because what you are proposing is not as satisfying emotionally. Where else am I to go? You're trying to tell me that my parents go into debt every year? That's not very fulfilling. Not compared to me being rewarded for my good behavior every year by a magic, overweight man in a red suit coming down my chimney. So I'm going to go ahead and continue believing in Santa Claus, because it's better in my mind than the alternative. I wouldn't want to live in a universe without Santa Claus. Obviously, that would not have led Adam to the right conclusion, and it doesn't work in practice in the real world. How about this idea that it just feels true, that it has the ring of truth? A lot of people, a lot of faiths have that. Mormons have that. Mormons, in the Book of Mormon itself, it suggests that if you want to be certain that this is true, after reading this book written in 16th century English during the 19th century for no apparent reason, it says, test to see that this is true simply by, after reading a passage, praying to God, and He will give you the sensation that it is true, and you will feel it within you. And, of course, people actually report having that feeling. The problem is feelings are very easily manipulated. In the modern world, there is an entire industry built around the fact that it is easier to motivate people to action by manipulating their feelings than by propelling them logically. It's called the advertising industry, and it works very well. How would that have worked out for Adam? Which thing was he most likely to feel was the right decision? It's kind of hard to believe that he made the choice he made because it felt wrong. Even if he did, it was sort of a 50-50 shot. Which one of these choices felt better to him? Certainly probably would have felt like he was at least being loyal to his wife. Recall, she approached him having already had consumed some of the fruit. Anyway, the list is pretty endless of faulty lines of reasoning that would have led Adam to the wrong choice. And if it would have caused the perfect man to get the answer wrong, applying it in your own life makes no more sense. So you can test means, methodologies, and approaches to reason simply by saying, would this have worked out for Adam? One thing that definitely would have worked for Adam is rational thinking. And that is because rational thinking forces you to disregard your cognitive biases. You can be a little skeptical of both sides of the story, and you can ignore whatever emotions might otherwise get in the way of your judgment. Rational thinking, which in modern times is called the scientific method, involves first formulating a question, then a hypothesis, then testing it, and then deciding whether or not you have results. And if you don't have results, you have to devise new ways of testing. And if those tests are inconclusive, you just repeat them or come up with other ways, and eventually you force the world to reveal its secrets to you through the scientific method. The moral dilemma given to Adam in the Garden of Eden was humankind's first opportunity to employ the scientific method. By the time Eve had approached Adam, she had already consumed some of the fruit. So, all Adam had to say was, great, now I have a test subject, and I myself will be the control group. And we'll see how it works out for you, Eve. Either you are going to become godlike, and the serpent was right, or you will become shrivel up and die, and the original voice was right. Either way, I'm not making a decision until I have concrete results on this test subject. And if the results don't come through right away, we'll have some babies, we'll do double-blind controlled studies, and since I have an eternity, I will get to the bottom of this very important question, one way or another. This question of which voice ought to guide mankind. Think of all of the misery and suffering that could have been prevented if Adam had simply used rational thought and followed the facts wherever they led. None of those other forms of reasoning would have given him the right answer, at least not reliably. The scientific method, 100% of the time, reliably would have given him the right answer. So, since it becomes apparent that you only have your own understanding to lean on at bottom, and the best way of aligning your own understanding with the real world is the scientific method, which certainly would have worked for Adam, not only should you not feel guilty for using your mind, you should feel guilty for not using rational thinking. Because if you fail to do that, you're no better than Adam, using the one gift that you can be certain you have, consciousness and a mind. With all that out of the way, I think the thing that really motivated me to make this video is having recently discovered all of the other videos online of people who are sharing their stories, and I've only come across this within like the last couple of weeks, and there was really nothing like that when I first left many, many years ago. And I think the more people who share their stories, the brighter the light is at the end of the tunnel. But the thing that I wanted to focus on, because I think it's underserved in this community, is the fact that it is a tunnel. And in my experience, it's not all sunshine and roses for many of the people who try to reach escape velocity. Some of them come crashing back, some of them fall on their faces. One girlfriend that I had, not one girlfriend, the girlfriend that I had at the time, temporarily woke up and then fell back asleep within a year and converted to Mormonism, probably because of the whole Santa Claus not finding something, a suitable alternative to be just as satisfying. Um, and there's this that was actually more of a success story, because at least she didn't completely fall on her face. Many of the kids that I grew up with, so it turned into just really went off the deep end, and it didn't work out well for them. I kind of thought I was one of the very few who landed on their feet, so I'm really encouraged to see so many others out there who have. There's a species of fish that lives really deep down in the immense pressure of the ocean. I'm sure there's plenty of species like that, but this particular one gets snagged by fishermen fairly frequently, and the problem is it's so well adapted to that immense pressure. Its organs, something about this organism displaces that pressure and pushes outward to keep its organs intact. And when you bring it to the surface where there's far less pressure, its eyes pop out of its face, its guts burst out from its belly, and it's really gross. And the truth is, there is a high risk of that happening to people who go from such a high pressure environment to suddenly having all that pressure alleviated. Just going crazy, just diving in and having their eyes pop out of their face. That is to say, it's not all uplifting stories. It is possible to misuse this newfound freedom and really screw up your life. In addition to going from a high pressure environment to a low pressure environment, there are all sorts of other factors that come into play during this transition in your life. There's the undeniable fact that you are emotionally primed to think in very short-term increments. That for most of your life you were thinking that one way or another things were going to change radically within a year or less. Always just around the corner was the prospect of eternal life in a completely different system, or that you were going to die. And neither of them puts much responsibility on you in terms of figuring out how to navigate this system and preparing for the future and treating the person you want to become in this system better than the person you presently are. So even if you have logically come to the conclusion that now you have a lot more time than you thought in this system, you might emotionally not be there yet. You might be able to think in terms of 2, 4, 8, 16 years in the future. But it's a very foreign feeling. It's not, you're not really emotionally visualizing how you're still actually going to be here. And that's not to say this system is going to be exactly the same. I happen to think we're going to witness some truly revolutionary and amazing technological progress in the next 20 years. But either way, it's not paradise and it's not Armageddon happening in the next couple of years. So it can be tempting for some people to say, oh, well, I was going to die anyway, so eat, drink, and be merry, and make terrible decisions that could screw up the rest of your time on this planet. It's also possible to emotionally buy into the self-fulfilling prophecy that it's all doom and gloom, and you're alienated from the creator of the universe, and it's impossible to make it. Well, it doesn't help that you very likely have no financial or emotional support. But I can tell you, in my case, when I first got to California after traveling quite a bit, I lived in a tent. I came here with nothing but a backpack, and by treating the person I wanted to be with a little more respect and dignity than the person I currently am, I gradually clawed my way into the middle class and had a couple of properties, and I'm not going to say it was easy, but it is possible. That there's certainly light at the end of the tunnel. But what I would, I was just watching Toy Story with my daughter, and there's a scene in Toy Story where Buzz Lightyear, who is a toy, who doesn't realize that he's a toy, suddenly realizes that everything he thought, everything he was so certain about, was all just a delusion. His wings are just plastic, they don't work. His laser is just the light, it doesn't do anything. And his world kind of comes apart. And there's a scene where he's looking down an aisle with all these other Buzz Lightyear toys that are identical to him, and he realizes they're all toys just like me. And I think at this point in a lot of people's lives, you could be looking down that aisle and you see Scientology as one toy, and Mormonism as another, and evangelicals as another, and the aisle is endless, and they're all just toys, just like the one that you inhabit. And there's no magic or mystery behind any of them. And it can be very disheartening and disillusioning and discombobulating and all the disses. But the thing that Toy Story captures so well is during this dismal period in Buzz's life, he finds himself at hosting a tea party because some little girl took him under her wing, and she calls him Mrs. Nesbit. And the horror of this period of Buzz's life is that he starts calling himself Mrs. Nesbit, because he was so disenchanted that he was prone to take on whatever identity was offered to him by someone else. And the thing I would encourage everyone watching this who might be in this phase of their life without even realizing it is that you shouldn't do anything to solidify your role as Mrs. Nesbit during the Nesbit period of your life. So just because just because they were wrong about facial hair doesn't mean you should get a facial tattoo. Just because they mishandled child abuse doesn't mean you should try heroin. Just because they were deceptive and won't even own up to the fact that they prophesied in 1975 doesn't mean you should start smoking. Because you're going to be around a long time. And the things you do during this period of your life may impact the rest of your time on earth. So the newfound freedom can be a great thing, but it can also be a very hazardous thing. So don't make any rash decisions. Certainly don't hurt yourself. Don't make this temporary period of your life into a permanent definition of the rest of your life. That's the advice I have, because I haven't really seen in my own anecdotal experience a lot of success stories. And now that I see so many online, I'm kind of encouraged to maybe add my voice to the choir and say, yes, it is possible to land on your feet and lead a fulfilling and satisfying and even spiritually fulfilling life. But in order to do so, you're going to have to take responsibility for your life. And you can't look back and blame the labyrinth you just escaped from for allowing you to make bad decisions going forward. Okay, I'll be quiet. My daughter's telling me it's time to be quiet. So I really appreciate anyone who took the time to listen to this. And I didn't even really get into my own story, but maybe I'll do that. We'll see how well this video is received. So thanks everybody, and look out for yourself. Thanks for indulging me. Talk to you later.